We're live.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. I just wanted to welcome all the co-chairs to this meeting. We wanted to have a joint meeting to give us an opportunity to plan for the next subcommittee meetings, and then also think about what work should be delegated to each of the subcommittees after seeing a preview of the straw man during the monthly PEPSC meeting. I do have the slide deck available for us to peruse as we need to. Myself as well as Andrew will be here to take notes and make sure that whatever is thought through for each of the subcommittees for the next meetings in March, that is available. And I will also provide that summary to each of you and also your colleagues that are not here today, so everyone is on the same page as far as planning for the next subcommittee meetings. So to get started, I wanted us to have thoughts around where our work would be delegated for developing the model and thinking about what discussion points you want to have during your next subcommittee meeting. We will have the same presentation that you saw during the PEPSC monthly meeting to start off each of your meetings, so that will be identical. And then from there, I want you to think about where you want to go, as well as what work points you have that kind of stand out to you, and what you want to discuss today here as a joint group, so that we aren't overlapping on what work we are doing with the model.
Kim, this is Maureen.
Sure.
So this is kind of a little bit outside of what you're asking for right now, but I think it's a priority that we need to be considering. So this week in the Teachers United Facebook group, somebody posted the modified model. So that like one pager that has the like different pillars and talks about each one of the various levels. And without any explanation and without any information that was presented at the PEPSC meeting, only a picture of that model. And because teachers don't really have any other information to base that on, and of course they haven't gone to listen to the meeting, I'm sure, they are now all looking at this as a very negative thing. And I think in order for this to be successful, we're really going to have teachers behind us and have teachers understand why it's so important that we do change the way that we're currently licensing teachers, how that will benefit teachers, and how that's going to benefit the kids in our classrooms. And so I think maybe coming out of the subcommittee work, if we could have like a one sentence statement out of each one of the subcommittees that kind of is the nuts and bolts of what their body of work has done, and then combine that together into one joint statement that we could be pushed out as a common statement whenever there's questions that come up on social media, or if there's someone that sends us an email and asks us questions, or something that we could use that would be validated, that would be good information, and that would be consistent across all the subcommittees, so that as those questions come up, we have a way to address them immediately using some kind of positive marketing that's going to help teachers understand the benefit of the program.
Anybody want to add to that?
This is Ann. I'll add to that. I would say that you have the DPI right now after that presentation there's some EPPs on here that may think differently. I've only heard from very, very upset EPP people, because there was not a clear direction of where the EPP role is in this model. And even though Tom said it was, I forgot what the word was, Tom, monitoring or whatever, it wasn't defined of what that was. So there's some marketing. There's some clarity needed for EPPs. We need to respond to the the state organization and what they sent in relation to this. And also, I think it would be helpful and Maureen, you may have said this, sorry if I missed this part, I apologize if I'm repeating. It would be helpful to take the original model and talk about the impact of the subcommittee work and what it did on this model. And I just don't know that it's clear to me how it's any different than where we started. And I'm a subcommittee chair. And that could just be me and where I am right now with my work. And so I would say those are also challenges that we need to be ready to address.
I'll follow that. And I agree with virtually everything that's been said. I do think there is from what I'm hearing and what people have communicated to me, the initial reaction to this is frustration, concern. People don't feel like they've been heard. I do think it is important. I think probably one of the problems with the PowerPoint itself is there's actually too much detail in it. It's a sample, it's an example of a model, but it's got some pretty explicit language in it. And so I think if we can approach the structure I try to play out is at each license level, there is a framing of that license. This license is this. And then there's the components that are about requirements. What do we expect for that license? And then there's supports. And my read of the way the PowerPoint is constructed is the supports part are examples of supports. And the language is heavily invested in micro-credentialing, which we also know is a flashpoint. And so I think we can have multiple forms of support that come under each one of those. And I would say two things to connect to what Ann said. I think the EPPs need to be more explicit across this whole thing. They are mentioned, they are referenced in every licensure area. There's an EPP reference. I just think that needs to be more explicit as a critical support mechanism for this a critical partner for this to work, and how we can, rather than use examples, have sort of categories or resources and support will come from these partners. And that's where the EPPs become more present in the text. I will say, as a co-chair and just my read of this, I actually think we have made progress in terms of what's articulated in this and how this has changed. And I think that we need to be more assertive about the importance of the EPPs working with the districts. That to me, what this is elevating in work that I think is important is the importance of the collaboration and the partnership between EPPs and universities and school districts. And then we can talk about other partners with that. And so I think, number one, this is an opportunity to do that. Number two, the resource component of this alone is more, it breathes oxygen into some of the things I'll say as a dean of education, what EPPs can do. When we talk about what's going to happen with the salary structure, and we talk about that part that's in one of the, there's a reference in one of the slides to the apprentice model, that having a salary attached to it that would also be attached to people in residency, which I read in that to mean internships, because we've talked about that in our subcommittee. So I think we want to make sure people feel like they can provide us the critique that they think is warranted. And I've tried to express this out to colleagues in other institutions of higher education. We need to welcome the critique, but I also think we've got to make sure that we articulate, here's how it's different now than the original chart that we saw, or the original documents that we saw in March of 2021, because I think we have made progress.
Hey, Van, this is Ann. I just want to follow up. We could have made great progress, but it's just not clear, right? When I had Kim pull up that the original document, and then I listened to what was saying. I think we just need a comparison, right? Because people are going to be like, why have we been on the subcommittee?
Well, but Ann, I also think I have a responsibility as a co-chair to encourage and cajole people to give specific feedback that makes it better. That, yes, clearly there are things in it that are not as explicit as others. And I read my role with the subcommittees and what's going to happen over the next few months, make this better. And I mean, Hank and I haven't talked in a few weeks. I will encourage people to articulate things that end in a period. Let's tell the state board what needs to happen to make this clearer, more explicit, and stronger. And we should welcome all that feedback and critique in this. But yeah, it's not as, you're right, it is not as clear as it probably can be on some points. Let's make it clearer.
Yes, I'm agreeing with you.
Hi, this is Tom. I'm really enjoying this conversation because from the DPI perspective, this is exactly what we wanted. So we didn't want, the feedback we were responding to was from the subcommittees that we can't see how all this works together, and that is causing us some challenges in progressing. So this is just kind of our intent was to lay this out in a kind of beginning to end, soup to nuts kind of way. We never intended to create the perfect model or to explicate things exactly as they should be. I think one of the great things that subcommittee chairs that are getting feedback on social media or from colleagues is to say, great, that's a good point. We're going to take this up and start working on making this what we want it to be. That was always the intent. And so I'm really encouraged to hear that folks are looking at this as, here's a great jumping off point, and now let's make it what we need to send to the State Board of Education. So I hope you agree that that's what DPI provided to you, and not that we were trying to create the perfect thing.
And I want to say too that if I can jump in here, Tom, I have received a lot of positive feedback. I think from being from the budget and compensation side of things, I think people are trying to figure out how those salary suggestions will become reality, which heck, I'm trying to figure that out myself. But I do believe on our side there are some there's been a lot of positive feedback, and feel like that this really streamlines the licensure process as well, and how to become a teacher and the options. And so I applaud you guys for being able to articulate that and piecing it all together.
As a strategy point, and this may go back to the first comment, I think part of what we're seeing right now is the limits of PowerPoint. I mean, to really flesh this thing out in a PowerPoint, we'll have a feature-length movie that nobody wants to watch. So I think we may be, if it hasn't started to be crafted yet, there needs to be a companion document where we can flesh things out a little bit. We can have more narrative to flesh some things out, so we're not living in the PowerPoint and the limitations of that one graph. You can only get so much on an 8.5 by 11 graph. Did that make sense, Tom?
And that made perfect sense.
Yeah, it does to me. I mean, PowerPoint feels like a weak tool for this purpose.
It has its limits.
Is there a way to have like to take one of them and just try to come up with a kind of an executive summary? Like one of the levels, sorry, I'm saying one of them, like say license level 3 or whatever it's called. and come up with like a couple page written out connection. Would that be helpful? I'm pushing that out as an idea and not as necessarily as the solution, but just an idea. Because I do think people read into whatever visual they see. Not that they won't read into the writing either, but.
Yeah, so Dr. Bullock, my response to that is DPI is here to serve you in whatever way you need. So if that's what you folks want to do, we're happy to do whatever you need us to do.
Yeah, what do other people think would be helpful? Because we know that, like, you know, we had some people, like, I mean, everybody was thrilled to see, everybody I've talked to was thrilled to see the salary, agreeing with Aaron, but other people were like, I don't understand what my role is, right? Like, meaning EPPs that contacted me. I don't understand my role in this. I mean, are we just being erased from the face of the earth? What does monitoring mean? Do we need a vocabulary? I mean, what do other people think would be helpful to squash the myths, right? And to explain the things that need to be explained.
And I think Ann is right. I do think the vocabulary piece is what could be lacking. And the reason why I say that is if you look at the pathway, the licensure pathway where we have the suggested salary amounts at the bottom and all that, I do think people struggle of where they jump on the train. You know, 1, 2, 3, you know, so on. And I don't know if there's a way on that sheet, and it'll be a really big sheet probably, right? But if there's a way to put as much detail on there as possible so you don't have to read through the document. And Dr. Dempsey's right too, that you can only do so much with a slide. So, for example, do people understand the difference between a 1 and a 2, license 1, license 2, and how is there a way? Because sometimes when people give me scenarios and I look at it, I have to walk myself through, okay, would you be starting at a 1 or, you know, and so I don't know if there's a way to maybe clear that up. But Ann, am I on the same page with you with that?
Yeah, and I don't know that my idea is the idea, but I do think if we could tease out some of this language, because I don't know what it means when the word monitoring, because I mean, I know what monitoring means, but I don't know what it means in this case, right? Like, and I think that was a trigger word. I think also, yeah, I mean, I think minimally vocabulary, maybe an explanation of, you know, what it means. So, yeah, I think we're on the same page, Aaron.
Yeah, Ann and Aaron, I think those are really great points. And then, you know, I also wonder if we do multiple different ways of trying to get the information out, right? Because for some people, looking at the diagram is going to be the best way. Somebody else is going to want to dig deep into the literature and try to figure out and read the entire report and understand the nuances of each one of the levels and what that will look like for them or for their colleagues. And I also think it might be helpful if we were able to do some kind of like, I don't know if listening tour or town hall is the right word, but some place where people could log in and maybe we could do it like regionally based and offer it also virtually where people could come and ask the questions. Because I think that's where a lot of the confusion is right now is, you know, some of the questions are getting emailed to committee chairs. But a lot of the questions I think are just floating out there in the ether. And then the danger with that is that other people who don't understand the process are trying to answer those questions, which is just kind of adding to that angst and adding to the uncertainty and adding to the not understanding the vocabulary. And I think if we had like a systemized way that we were able to kind of gather those questions and answer as many questions as possible, that I think that would really help kind of quell some of those fears, but also get really great feedback for us, because then we would be able to hear, like, what are the concerns? What are people worried about? What do people not understand? And if we're seeing the same comments in each one of those town hall listening tour meetings, then we'll know, okay, this is a real major concern that we need to come up with some kind of product to address so that we can really help people understand how XYZ works, or how you transition from level 1 to level 2, or where you're going to start on day 1 of this process if you are currently a licensed teacher with 17 years experience on a continuing license. And I think that the more ways we come up with to help people understand what this model is and how this model will work, the better off we're going to be in helping make this something that ends up being very successful in North Carolina. Because if we don't roll it out properly, it is not going to be successful. But this model has the potential to revolutionize the way that we educate kids and the way that we ensure that you have that highly qualified teacher in every single classroom. Because bottom line is, the basic sound education that's mandated by Leandro, that starts with the teacher who starts standing in front of those kids. We can throw as much money and as many resources and many credentials and all the other awesome bells and whistles as we want at districts. But if there is not a highly qualified, effective teacher standing in front of those kids teaching them, none of that resources and none of that money is going to make any difference, because you have to have someone who's really good at working with kids standing in front of them in order to reach that equity.
And to add to that, I think, I believe it was Alex that did it, but EdNC did a wonderful job covering this, but because they did a really good job covering it, it creates a lot of questions because people share it on social media, which is where some of the questions came from me, because I've had teachers that didn't know I was on PEPSC, but then looked and noticed, and so they'll ask various questions. So it does create a lot of questions, even with the best coverage of it. And I do wonder if real life examples, because I mean, every teacher now says, oh, well, I'm an advanced teacher, I want to do whatever adult leadership is so I can make $72,000. And unfortunately, that's not every teacher. But I think a lot of teachers might think it's them, or that they would have that ability to lead PD, even though they might be on an action plan. I mean, I'll just tell you, I can just see that now with everybody is looking at dollar signs and not necessarily ability. So I think giving some examples of what it would take, you have Sally and John, and, one has a bachelor's degree and one, in the required courses they need or whatever it may be, and kind of illustrate how they grow throughout their career. Just a thought.
And everybody, I'm doing a open forum in our college this afternoon, and we're going to talk about the basics of this, and we've done that a couple of times before. And people, and the kinds of concerns and questions that are being raised here, people have raised in our other forums, and I'm sure they will today. But in trying to get my head around, how do you explain this thing in 15 minutes or 10 minutes? And as I was working through that to get ready for the day, I came up with 3 sort of big foundations that sits on. One is the structure and the process of getting to the license and then through the license. So what gets one ready to be an apprentice, and then what are the outcomes that we expect when a person is an apprentice? So what's the structure and process of getting to and through? The second are the tools. What are the things that we can put in people's hands in terms of professional learning that are part of that structure and process? And in the PowerPoint, there is the ITSP, the PEER, the micro credentials, the EPP-based coursework, EPP/PSU partnerships. I assume DPI and the PSUs will be actors in this, and then there are the vendor actors that we haven't talked about. So the second part of this is the tools. How does one gain the professional knowledge and skills to be able to hold and then keep the license? And then the third is the outcomes, that assuming one has attained this license and one is engaging in the level of practice we would expect to see in that license, we would expect these outcomes. And so there's language throughout the slides that's about the outcomes that we're looking for a person. And it's not to make it simple in that sense that we'll just make it about these three things and then we're all good. I think part of this is there's a whole lot of detail in this, but it's probably short on helping people get their heads around structure. And those were the three buckets that I came through to thinking through. I think it's 31 slides, thinking through those 31 slides. And then working out from that. Because there's going to be 1,000 things like, what does monitor mean? And down to that level of detail, but we don't know what it means if we don't know how it's attached to the broader intent and purpose of the structure.
Van, that resonates with me. I mean, I think that's a great way of framing it, and I think, this idea of monitoring, I think that absolutely has to be fleshed out, and we have to, say what it is. Because we would just, I think our goal was just to get it in there that something has to be occurring here. So tell us what that is. And I don't think, I do understand the concern from EPP folks, but I think that was going a little beyond what we were trying to do. We're just trying to put the placeholders in place so that this thing reads coherently from beginning to end. It's regrettable that I think that people are dissatisfied, but that also creates, anticipation for how this is going to be further refined. So I think people will be paying attention and looking at what's coming out.
And I just want to clarify, I don't know that, I think people have jumped to assumptions because of lack of knowledge. So I don't know. So I want us to be clear that I think what we're talking about here about providing more knowledge and opportunity, because you were very clear in the presentation that this is a starting point. Again, right? A 2.0 starting point, right? So I think that the more information, which you talked about and the ways we can get it out, I think the clarification will come.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, and I think we have coupled with that a responsibility of the stakeholders to listen to the information and hear what is being presented. I was getting text messages 5 or 10 minutes into the presentation the other day. Again, it was 31 slides, and we're on slide 6. There's a lot to come. So there are a lot of built-in assumptions about not trusting this. I will tell you, as an individual dean and a member of PEPSC, I don't believe I've ever given anybody a reason to not trust me on this. But that assumption is baked into the discourse about this model among some people in some places. In hearing our colleagues, particularly the ones from the institutions of higher education and the EPPs, I believe they have to exercise more agency. We have clearly established that the best route to becoming a teacher in North Carolina is through a university-based educator preparation program. We've established that, and I think we've established that clearly. And that was not established when this process began, but it has been established, documented, and it's right there in the visual. We've established that in the allocation of resources, that route above the other three should be the route that we value through dollars in saying this is the most important way to become a teacher. While I totally appreciate the frustrations and anxiety people are feeling, we need that to be coupled with agency. How can I exercise my agency to elevate the role of EPPs now? Because we are the archivist of the most powerful knowledge base in this process that we impart to our graduates, who become the best teachers according to outcomes. And so I hope, and I will certainly push this in our subcommittee, initial teacher success program. I don't really know what that is yet, but I know I have every intention of making sure the Watson College is a partner in doing that. I don't know exactly what the PEER, I don't even remember what the words stand for, but I know it is in this model. It is my intention as the Dean of the Watson College to make sure that whatever that model is, the Watson College is a partner in that model. And we're partners in the design and delivery of micro-credentials. And we already have a school-university partnership. And we partner with DPI and we partner with other PSUs. This is an opportunity to reinforce, elevate, and given the resources the state needs to provide, expand our capacity to support the profession. And the model that I have in my head is the area health education centers that are across the state. This is in my mind, this is a huge opportunity for the EPPs to see the knowledge base as a knowledge base that belongs to the profession. And we impart it through our programs with our partners. And I am not suggesting, and therefore no one should be anxious and frustrated. I'm just saying, while we're exercising our responsibility to be a critic, let's also exercise our responsibility to be an agent on behalf of the profession. And I think that opportunity and set of possibilities is here. Pardon me for the speech, but I think I was trading text messages during the meeting the other day. I think there's this illusion that Tom Tomberlin and Van Dempsey every night go out and applaud each other for the beauty of this work. Tom Tomberlin and I have gone at it. I mean, we have disagreed as vehemently as we have agreed, as passionately as we have agreed. So I hope everyone recognizes the complexity and the hard work of getting this to the best place we can get it. And takes a lot of voices and a lot of perspective and strategy. So I want our colleagues to hear that there is opportunity, and I'm not sure they're hearing it. And in part, they're not hearing it because of the assumptions, as you pointed out, Ann.
Yeah, and I think they're also not hearing it right. A lot of it is where's my piece of the cheese, right? And then the other piece is, we sent in this, the North Carolina Associated Teacher Ed sent in this whole document, and no one has responded to it except saying thank you very much for sending it. So I think that also sends a message from quote our end about, and I haven't responded to it, right? Because it's a collective response that we don't want to hear, right? So it gives, again, people make assumptions when they don't hear. So there's some work there.
And I appreciate that, but I was contacted during Tom and Andrew's presentation several times, asked by a representative of NCACTE, would I be willing to participate in a conversation about this work? And I will be explicit in my response. I said, I will come meet with anybody, anywhere, under whatever conditions, Zoom or face-to-face, to discuss the importance of this work, including the concerns and criticisms about it. But I would not appear as if I was before a grand jury, like that meeting that happened back 6 months or so ago with the UNC deans. I literally felt like I had been called in before a grand jury, like somehow I sat in my frog at my house and designed this whole thing. I'm a dean. I'm not some bystander who happened to pick up this document. But in the context of those text messages, a meeting was set up by NCACTE to discuss what Tom and Andrew presented. That was 10 o'clock Monday morning. I was asked to participate, said, I can't do it. If you can move it to the afternoon, I can do it. Did not get a response to that other than the meeting would be at 10 o'clock. I have offered multiple times to meet with the people in response to whatever they looked at in that Monday meeting at 10 o'clock. I haven't even gotten a response. I haven't gotten a no thank you. I haven't gotten we got it, we don't need you. I haven't gotten a leave us alone. I've gotten no response. And so there can't just be proactive response when people have a criticism and a concern. If you want to invite me as a dean of the Watson College of Education and a member of PEPSC to be part of the conversation, I'm invited into the conversation. At least respond to my damn text about my willingness to participate. So I hear you, but let's don't let folks off the hook about their failure to exercise their own agency and their own commitment to professional relationships.
So I have not been invited to any meetings, so good for you, Van.
But and that's my point. I was invited. I was asked. I responded with a yes. I've responded multiple times since. What can I do to help? I'm not getting a response. But during the meeting, if I blinked my eyes, I got a response. So I'm just saying, I am one of us. I am one of the higher ed folks and one of the EPP folks. You got to be responsible all the time, not just when the conversation benefits your criticism. We're talking about the teaching profession in North Carolina. We're not talking about just EPPs. We're members of PEPSC. We're talking about the teaching profession in North Carolina. And if people want to engage, you got to engage. You can't pick and choose. Well, I don't want to be there, but I'll be here. No, you got to engage. Get with it. I'm going to mute myself now, Tom.
And if I can, I just, that's been a little different experience than I've had, but also on the K-12 side, we have, and I'd like to see if Maureen's heard anything as well. Ours have been really on the salaries, I think. We haven't had a lot of, and I guess it's because teachers are certified, so they're not too worried about what they won't have to go through. But I will say we've heard a lot about, and I say we as in just my HR director and I, we've talked and people have asked us, have had a lot of conversation on the salaries. But again, the process of moving up the licensure tree and even how to even become an advanced teacher necessarily hasn't even come up as much as I just want to make the money. So I'd be curious to hear what Maureen has heard on that.
Yeah, Dr. Fleming. So Julie Pittman and I at the Teacher Leadership Summit that we had at the beginning of the month actually had a chance to talk to the 30-ish teachers that were in attendance at the conference. And we just kind of gave them an overview of what the Human Capital Roundtable was and kind of gave them some 30,000 foot view and then took a lot of questions. And Joe Kamenis was there with me as well. And Dr. Miller provided us with some documentation so that we could use that to kind of help them understand what the program was. And then I also had a chance to meet with K-12 teachers as part of the Innovation Lab. And so I would say on the whole, there's really positive feedback about the change in structure with the salaries. People are really excited about that. There is some concern, which Dr. Tomberlin's already addressed, about whether or not national board certification would still be kind of built into the new model, or whether that would exist outside. And he's already let us know that that's going to exist outside if that continues to be funded. And then the same question about master's degrees. And then there was also some just kind of questions and trying to understand, what happens if I'm licensed as a advanced teacher, adult learner, but there's not a position available for me. How does that look? And so, we had some really great questions. We actually captured all the questions on a Jamboard, and so I can share that with everyone so you can kind of see what some of those K-12 concerns and questions were. But that's where I kind of got that idea for doing the listening tours, because that was very, very helpful for me to kind of understand when I'm talking to teachers or when we're introducing the model, what are going to be maybe some of the questions or concerns that are going to come up that we can build into the discussion so that we're answering those questions before people are, getting anxious about it. We've already explained something to them we know was a common question. It also really gave us some excellent feedback on what some of the different criteria should be to move from a level 1 to a level 2, or what should you be able to do if you're an advanced teacher in that adult leadership. We went to our BTs to ask that question, what would you want from your mentor? What are the things that you really need from your mentor? And we use that to help build in some ideas. And so I think, first of all, I really welcome the academic debate because I don't think we get to the right solution, and we will never get to the right answer if we aren't willing to accept the criticism and then either determine, okay, is that piece of criticism something that we need to build into this model, or is that something that's already been addressed by another subcommittee, or is that something that's not really going to benefit the kids in our classrooms? But I also think that it's very valuable to talk to teachers and find out what are their concerns and what are their ideas, because I think, I might be the only practicing classroom teacher that's able to make it to most of the meetings. I know we have some other practicing classroom teachers that are on the committees or the subcommittees, but I think I'm the only one that's able to consistently make it to the meetings. And I think it's really important that we're including K-12 teachers, superintendents, teachers' assistants, all the different types of educators in the conversation, including our EPPs and our other partners and all the stakeholders, so that we're able to get the perspective and viewpoints from all of the stakeholders to really come up with a solution that's going to work the best for our kids. And so, because really the bottom line is the whole reason why we want to do this is because we have those 1.5 million kids sitting in our classrooms. And by finding the best solutions, by engaging in the conversations and asking the questions and listening to the feedback and using that to develop the best model we possibly can, but then also being very clear and open that we know that there's going to be changes that will need to happen to this. We need to build in ways that things can be modified or adjusted, so that we're able to continue modifying this to make it the best program we possibly can, I think is really important. And so I invite the questions. I invite when people ask me to come to their schools and talk about things. I think we have, Julie has really built out a great system of communication from the districts up to the state and from the state back down to the districts. And so I think we could really utilize that to really get some great feedback, but also use it to make sure people are well informed about what this model is and how this model could be something that truly changes the way we're educating our kids for the better.
So this is Tom. I think I just have to say that it's hard for me. I hear all the concerns, but from my perspective and DPI's perspective, I think I should say it that way. One and concerns of the chair was that this work didn't have the way that this was operating. We were kind of at an impasse, or we were at a blockage. And so it's really hard for me. I understand all the kind of the feedback and the confusion from the field, but it does seem to me that some level of success has been appreciated from this, in that I feel like people are talking about how to correct these things. And that's very different than the conversations that were going on in the subcommittees prior to this. And I hope this level of discourse translates into the subcommittee work. Like, we now know what we have to do to make this model what it needs to be. And that was the whole intent of what we did. So, I appreciate the frustration. I appreciate the feedback, and it should be this and it should be that. That's great, because I think now when we go back into our subcommittees, there's going to be this whole idea of, well, we can't understand what this is doing in this place and that place. That impediment has been removed, and that's what I was shooting for. I think that's what Chairman Miller was shooting for when he asked us to do this. So, I'm trying to see this as anything less than an unmitigated success. That it feels like we've cleared the blockage, and that's all DPI was hoping for in this. Now, I will say to the feedback that we're getting, I do hear, I have gotten, Chairman Miller has passed on a lot of feedback from the field, the K-12 field particularly, about where National Board fits into this. This is great feedback that we're going to bring to the subcommittees when we reconvene. We didn't touch this because in the beginning, it was decided we weren't touching this, that this had nothing to do with the National Board Certification Supplement, and we were leaving that alone, and so that definitely, I think, needs to be at least articulated what the subcommittee's view on that is, and how that should go forward. Also, we've gotten feedback that the local supplements are not articulated in here, and I've been we don't tell the locals what to do with their money, and I don't think this model should deviate from that position. Like, it is our expectation that the locals would continue to do what they do with their local funding in terms of supplements, and we're creating a state model. And I think we've got to be very clear about that this is, when we talk about this is just like you're looking at the teacher salary schedule. That is the state portion of teacher compensation. And we're not in the business of telling locals how they will or will not spend their money in terms of local supplements. But I think an articulation that this model does not preclude the locals from doing some kind of local supplement would be great. But I'm concerned about saying anything that goes beyond our reach in terms of the locals. And Aaron, Dr. Fleming, I'm really interested in your thoughts on that. As you know, I think you're the only superintendent on here right now.
No, I mean, I tend to agree with you on it. I don't know. And I hadn't heard the kind of some of the higher ed opinions on it, but I just, on our side, like I said, we hear a lot about how do I get the salary, but I don't, and I'm not, like I said, I'm just one, right? So I don't know what others have heard, but Tom, I think it's been communicated all right. I think there's things we can clear up, but.
All right.
And Tom, my only disagreement with you today is I wouldn't call it an unmitigated success, but we've got work to do, but we've got success, and we can build on it. So unmitigated, I got to challenge you on that one. Otherwise, I think getting this in the hands of the subcommittees now, that's where the good work is going to happen.
I do think it is a success. I do think it is a success because we made it to this point, regardless, right? So, I mean, that's the positive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I agree. I think this has been an absolute success, and I think the questions and the feedback are all like aiming to get to the best model we can come up with. But I think the work that's been done to this point has been extraordinary, and I really think that this is the way we revolutionize education in North Carolina. And so Dr. Tomberlin and everyone at DPI, I just want to thank you for all the work that you've done on this to kind of pull together all those conversations we had in subcommittee meetings and really working on this to get it to where we can start really working with the draft and put it back to the subcommittees to do that heavy lift to figure out what we need to do to move forward. But I would agree. I think this has been an absolute success.
Well, I appreciate that, Maureen. And to your point, Van, when I said unmitigated success, I was referring specifically to what I saw as the problem that we were facing, and that is the blockage or the kind of, I guess, writer's block that we were experiencing in the subcommittees. Yes. The inability to move forward, and I think that, I mean, it seems to me like that's going to be less of a problem as we move back into the subcommittees.
I agree. Yeah.
All right, Kim, I don't think we're going to have time, and we've got a sufficient number of co-chairs on here to divide up the labor. What are we scheduled? Are we scheduled till 10?
We are scheduled till 10:30.
Okay. I think a critical piece of this is looking at all the issues that we feel like need to be addressed within this model and making sure that those are appropriately assigned to the correct subcommittees so we don't have people working at cross purposes here. So who's going to take what and who's going to take what pieces of this and say, we'll take care of, this subcommittee is going to take care of all the clarifying issues around this concern. I don't know the best way. Kim, do we want to try to take a stab at that today, or do we think that we can?
Well, it seems to me that several of our co-chairs are missing. And so that might need to be something that co-chairs are discussing. We could start thinking about that now, but then go back to your two co-chairs. Aaron, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I'm bad at interrupting, so I raised my hand. I did want to say I wonder, and now I don't at all want this to be kind of an us versus them, but the concerns that Ann and Van and all were talking about, I think they may have some valid concerns that I don't necessarily know how to fix. I do think those of us in the K-12 world may be able to fix some of our questions. I'm using a much easier word than what it would be, but to answer or fix our issues. And I just wonder, again, I don't want to mess the subcommittee structure up, but I wonder if there are not ways for them to take kind of a stab at some of the things that they need clarified, and we do the same. And again, I don't want to make it sound like we don't want higher ed involved or the EPPs involved in our stuff, and we don't want to be involved with theirs. And if it comes across that way, then I say we keep it the same. But I do wonder, they seem to have some very complex questions that I don't know that I could add value to. And so I don't know, and like, for example, for my subcommittee, I know we've answered a lot of ours. I think if we answer too many more of our questions, we're in other areas. Example, how do I become an advanced teacher in classroom excellence? Well, we can answer that, but it's not our area. I don't know that has to be discussed today, and I do have another meeting I've got to run to, but I'm going to hang in here as long as I can. But maybe, I don't know, maybe I just threw a monkey wrench in everything, but I'd be curious to see if you think that could be another angle to answer some of the questions or to clarify some things.
So, Dr. Fleming, are you saying that those that are from the K-12 world would work together to think about K-12 thoughts, and then EPP folks would be working together to think about what areas need to be worked on, and then think about them from where they belong subcommittee wise?
Yeah, you have summarized that in quicker than I explained it. Absolute. That's what I'm suggesting. But on the other side too is I don't know that we should kill off our subcommittees either. So that's where I think I'm struggling is.
Well, I don't feel like you're trying to kill off the subcommittees. I feel like you're trying to gather the expertise for that particular focus in the world of education to then make sure that there are no gaps in what needs to be done.
I agree, because Van was talking about, hey, he's going to have to get in front of his faculty and staff later today to maybe answer questions or whatever. Well, I'm glad he's doing it, because if he put me in his place, I wouldn't have a clue how to address them and their questions. Where, if I had a group of teachers that wanted to go through this I think I could explain that. I don't know. I think because the constituencies are different, that's the only reason I made that suggestion.
I understand.
I'm sorry, Kim, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm just think this is a really fascinating idea, and I'm interested to hear what other folks think about this, because I mean, I think we need to be very careful that we're not setting up or even suggesting that that EPPs in K-12 is at cross purposes. That's not what I'm hearing at all. What I'm hearing is, and I think this has been surfaced in this conversation, is there are issues with this model that have a distinct higher ed lens and a distinct K-12 lens, and reconfiguring the refinement along those two streams rather than the 4 subcommittees we have might be a better way to kind of approach the division of labor on this. Like the higher ed folks, we're giving that, those issues where they're seeing that it's not clear about how preparation programs are working in this model, can start working on how that's further clarified. K-12 folks have there are a lot of questions on the K-12 side about how this works. I'm thinking of, how do you fund these advanced teacher positions? Is this allotment based? Is this some other kind of formula? Those are all big concerns, I think, for K-12. And I think that seems like a reasonable way to try to manage the work, because it almost feels like, the general pathways here are pretty clear. And so does that kind of negate the need for, these aspects specific subcommittees, and we take a broader approach to that? I don't know. I'm interested in what other folks think about that.
And Van and Hank and Ann, I'm curious if does my suggestion there, and again, as Tom has kind of described it, do you think that does draw a line? Because if you feel like it does, I completely rescind my suggestion there, because that's not at all my intention.
My immediate feeling is I worry that we would have the meeting and we would default to a conversation that we probably have had 5 times in our subcommittee before we broke through. And Tom made the reference about breaking through earlier. Before we break through, and how to structure the meeting so that we're open to making sure people can articulate concerns and critiques, but that the purpose of the meeting is to refine the model. And that could be incorporating what we learn from the critique, from whatever critiques people have. I think also, short of reconstituting a committee, which I'm perfectly willing to do, it needs to be a conversation of the EPPs with K-12 partners, because I think that's part of the problem that is occurring right now is EPPs too easily get siloed as something that happens at the university. And if that's how you're doing teacher education, you're doing it wrong. I don't know another word to say, it's just wrong. The way EPPs work at their best is it is a collaboration between the higher education institution and their K-12 partners to educate people to become teachers and other educators. So I like that. I really think it needs to get back in the hands of people who can work the language. But I think we got to make sure that there's some K-12 people to reflect that collaborative component as we're working through some of these issues. I would go so far as to say the EPPs that collaborate most authentically with partners like school districts, community agencies, DPI, and others are going to be the ones that in 5 to 7 years have really excelled as a result of this. And the degree to which you don't collaborate, you're going to be in trouble. So, and I would say rightfully so, you're going to be in trouble. So I think I like the suggestion, but it sure would be a good time let's talk about this as a conversation that happens in that collaboration.
I also wonder, because I really like the idea and the suggestion, and I also wonder if maybe there'd be an opportunity to utilize like adjunct professors who are K-12 teachers but also teach in higher ed, and maybe kind of use them as like a bridge between the K-12 and EPPs, because they would understand both sides of the concern, because they would be in both those worlds. So I don't know if there's other opportunities. Maybe we could look for people that kind of span between K-12 and higher ed, and find ways to kind of connect with them and have kind of ask them to be pulled in on some of this work as well, to kind of help act as that bridge between the two different levels of ed.
So this is Tom. I think this is a really interesting idea. I agree with the potential peril here of making this look like EPPs do something separate and apart from LEAs, and LEAs do something separate and apart from EPPs. You're right. I don't think that's in any way the message we want to send, because that should not be the case. I guess what I'm wondering is how do we? I'm just interested in moving this work forward. Like, how do we best move from here? What's the right way? Do we just go back to our subcommittees and we've got kind of new questions to grapple with, given this updated model, and everybody's clear on what their questions are? Or do we try to do something different? And I guess that's the feedback we need from you folks on the line here, because we need to talk to Chairman Miller about, what is going to best serve the work moving forward. And you folks should be the ones you're the subcommittee co-chairs. You're the ones that should be informing him on what you need in order to best make this work move forward.
And I think on your subcommittee, you have more K-12 people than we do on ours, but I don't know all the names. But I'm just scrolling through that slide. I do think there are more K-12. Tom, where I'm going with this is maybe it's a joint. Maybe at this point, it's not the individual subcommittees, it's crossover. And we've done that once or twice between prep and entry and licensure.
We have quite a few. And then, of course, Wesley, who's in HR, is my co-chair. So I'll go back to, I'm open to the structure, but I'll go back to the pragmatic logistics that I would like. I would like for us to compare where we are now to where we started. I would like for us to have a vocabulary list of these things, and then maybe an executive summary of a couple of the key licensure areas. I would like the definition of why it says 18 hours and where that research came from in terms of content knowledge. Because I think it's a reorientation. So if I came to a meeting, it's just the same way I am now, because I haven't had a chance, just with what's going on in my world over here, I haven't had a chance to compare and to really, Van's done a better job of having a chance to dive into this. And so to me, if I were coming to a subcommittee meeting as a busy educator, I would appreciate an orientation of to where we are now and what this all means before I can make suggestions on how to improve it. Because then if we don't do that, I feel like we're making assumptions. So how we orient ourselves, I'm open to that, but that's what I would like. That is what I am requesting.
And do you mean comparison of this compared to what the profession was before, or this compared to the initial draft of this?
I think the initial draft, because we kept referring back, and I know some things were made, a lot changes were made. I believe I don't know, Kim, if those changes were made along the way or they were all made in one swoop on this one. I can't remember, because I know some things were clarified as we went along, or notes were made to clarify. I think you could do it from both stances, right? I can go back to the purpose and the rationale of DPI requirements being more streamlined and providing more options so that for all the reasons, right? So we provide more opportunities for people to enter the profession so that we don't block people from the profession who can't pass the test, you know, all those kinds of things. So is that what you're talking about, Van?
Yeah, you're asking about progress in this work, not the profession in North Carolina used to look like this and now it's going to look like that.
No, I'm talking about progress in this work, because that's what they know, right? Like that's what subcommittees know. And also a clear, and then lead with a clear, then you've got to go through the process just like we've done today, where you talk about the process and what is confusing and what more information do they need before you can ever get to probably some really clear things to change or things to improve or clarifications. You're going to get to clarifications before you're going to get to new ideas most of the time, just from my sequential thought process.
So, Kim, I want to make sure we capture that. So the request is to build out kind of the current state of the teaching profession, the current state of licensure. Let's just stick with licensure for right now, or licensure and compensation. The current state of licensure and compensation. How the original human capital roundtable graphic modified that, and then how the straw man here has further changed that vision, and so we see kind of the iterations of where we are now to where we hope to be moving. And then within that is a kind of lexicon of terms we use and rationales behind those terms and those things. Do I have it right?
I believe so. Yeah. And if we could have, I mean, I did say the executive summary piece, like if one of these, you know, like if there are things and that can be part of the vocabulary, right? Because it's about, you know, the management or whatever it's called, I can't ever remember the word that it was used, but in the PowerPoint, but that needs to be explained. Monitoring, that word. And I think somebody, maybe it was Aaron, talked about maybe having an example or two of like what I would call like a mini, it's like, you know, Tom the teacher, Kim the teacher, Andrew the teacher, how it might look.
Okay. All right.
And I wonder too if it doesn't, because I know PEPSC and the subcommittees have a huge budget. No, but I wonder if I guess there's department resources, but could you do almost a video? I don't know if a video, you might be able to illustrate it on paper, but of hey, like I said, hey, I'm Tom, I'm a new teacher, or I've been called to teach, and here's my process through this, and you have different people entering at different points. I don't know. Like I said, you may be able to put that on paper too. I do think that would explain it, but for those that may not always learn everything off a chart or something.
So I'm having some hesitancy in explaining this model because this model is not the model. And I don't want to put too much in I would rather, I'm hearing you on, once the model has been determined by the subcommittees, how can we create, accessible knowledge about what happens to people at various states of their preparation and how they enter this program and the system and how they move through the system. I think that's great, but I'm hesitant to do it on this model because, and I know that there's folks in the field that don't believe the statement I'm getting ready to make. But our intent was not to create the model. Our intent was to create a cohesive, fleshed out model that can help the subcommittees understand how all these things work together, because that's the feedback we were receiving. We don't understand how all these things piece together, and that's kind of limiting our ability to move forward. So that's what we did, with the full expectation that this would not be the thing, that this would be the starting point that got us past that obstacle we were experiencing in the subcommittees. To put too much around this, I'm afraid, is going to send the message that DPI knew what it wanted to do all along, and now we've put it out there what DPI wants, and that's what it's going to be. That is not the message. I am not supportive of that message.
Hey, Tom, may I riff a little bit? I think it will help with the concern you're talking about. And it's going to help me end the day without having a vote of confidence at the Dean of the Watson College of Education after my open forum happens today. So in my mind, this PowerPoint, which was an effort to articulate an example of what this could look like, is helpful in terms of identifying these things we've talked about today. That has four major parts, and I'd be happy to email this to you if this makes sense to people. There is the why question, not Ann's question. There is the why are we doing this? Why, before we ever saw a chart, are we doing this? And that should not be, this is what was broken, and this is how we're going to fix it. And that's part of the problem, is we begin the whole thing with the idea of something's broken. We should begin this with, what do we need to be able to do for children in North Carolina? That's the premise of the Excellence for Teaching Professionals. And then we get later into this, and that's where we start to get into things that may not be working. But the big why question, why are we doing this? The second thing is Ann's question. There is the then and now. So we began in February of whatever it was, 2021, with that original pathway chart, the original version of this. I think it was actually shared with us in March of 21. So we go from that to where we are now. So we started here, and here's what has been conceptualized in the work. So we got the big why question is first. We've got the then and now question is second. The third one is the structure that I talked about earlier. So we've got this structure of this pathway that goes from apprentice to advanced teacher. And in each of those columns under a license, in order to do this well, we require these three things. Number one, we've got to have a structure and process for getting to the license. What is the license? What is the purpose of it? And how do you get there? And then there is the professional learning and the professional development and the professional preparation that's tied to that license. How do you get there? And then once you get there, how do you maintain it? So this professional learning process is going on. So one is the structure and process, basically the definition of the license. The second is the resources and the tools that get you to the license and then help you maintain the license. And then the third is the outcome and the evidence. What are we expecting an apprentice teacher to be able to do? What are we expecting License 4 to be able to do in terms of the outcome? And so we're using those three parts, we frame each part of the pathway. And each part of the pathway sits on that list of tools that we've talked about here in the subcommittees, the ITSP, the PER, the micro-credentials, the EPP coursework, EPP PSU partnerships, DPI support, and the PSU support. So in every single column, those tools are in play. And then to go to something Ann said a minute ago, the next step is if we can get general consensus on that structure, which I think we can if we frame it that way, then we're starting to do the deployment. Okay, if we're talking about an apprentice and a structure like this, and there are these tools that help lead to these outcomes, we've got to define those kinds of things that Ann mentioned a few minutes ago and that we talked about. What does monitor mean when you're working with an apprentice teacher? What do the terms mean as we apply them to each one of the licenses? And that's really getting into a level of detail that I suspect is coming next as we get closer to the state adopting the model. Tom, I'm saying all that because it gets us off this issue of, well, Tom doesn't really mean it. He really meant what he put in that PowerPoint. We just all know that, this is a backdoor way to get the state board to approve that. I don't believe any of that, but we might as well assume it to be that people are thinking it, and let's just redirect.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, that does.
I'll be happy to email that if that structure makes sense, but
I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, I captured it. I think
Okay.
Van, if you take a look at the notes after this and think it needs to be different, you can tweak it, but you don't have to start from scratch.
Okay. And I'm
Goodness, Andrew is doing something. Good job, Andrew.
It's a gift.
well, it may not help at all, but to me, it's taking. Let's take what we know and make it explicit, and let's take the concerns that we're hearing and make sure we've represented those in how the progress has been made. And if we haven't made progress on those concerns, let's talk about that in the next set of steps. As a co-chair, and I'll go back to a turn we took, a few months ago. We had to stop having meetings that were about asking the same questions that we had asked in every meeting. We had to start talking about declarative statements. The model should include this. The model should have this. The model should reinforce this. And take those questions and convert them into declarative statements that we want to make to the state board. We have to stay there. We can't go back to every meeting is about the prima facie questions.
Agreed.
I felt like I need to throw a little admin in there for the.
As a former classicist, I appreciate that, Van.
So we have about 7 minutes left, and I just want us to think about how we're going to figure out how to delegate the work per subcommittee. And also, do we feel like co-chairs need to meet more often with each other to kind of get at what Aaron was talking about, Dr. Fleming was talking about around EPP and K-12 collaboration, to have each other's input?
And Kim, I wonder, just because, and I certainly don't want to create another meeting just for meetings, but because we don't have all the chairs and co-chairs here, I wonder if we need to have another meeting like this. But I know getting everyone together is tough. So, you might have the same number of people the next time we meet too. But
well, I can aim for after the March subcommittee meetings and go ahead and send out a doodle poll now. And maybe we'll have more luck with that.
Okay. I'm just wondering if we need to get together and just have the same type of conversation, just with, more from, more from the EPP and the K-12 side, but just so we have more people at the table, I guess you could say.
Maureen, who is your co-chair?
Dr. Marr.
Okay. How would people feel about the co-chairs work with the DPI folks and we developed a next step draft? What, based on what we're hearing, the feedback we're getting from people and the NCACT feedback, and we have another meeting where we refine this based on that, and then we get that back out to the bigger group to look at. It feels like we got a little momentum out of this, and I agree. I agree. All the co-chairs putting the eyes on this is both being respectful of the co-chairs, but also think right now they've got the best eyes as a collective set of eyes.
So I do. You folks are very busy people. So is it better that we kind of draft some? Get the notes from this meeting and this conversation and push that out to everybody and say this is what happened, and give us your thoughts on this rather than trying to find a time when everyone can meet. I feel like the closer we get to the end of academic terms, the more difficult it is for people to meet. It's going to be much more difficult. Yeah.
Well, I think that we definitely should be sending out the notes as soon as possible. That was definitely next steps, Tom, for sure. I didn't know if the co-chairs wanted to meet in April to gather thoughts after the first subcommittee meetings, separate from getting the notes and starting to gather what each subcommittee's work should be.
Yeah, I think that's up to the I don't know what to say about that. I mean,
Sure.
Tom, speaking only for myself, calendars are crazy, but the next step on this is critical. I certainly would, if it takes another 90 minutes in the next 30 days to look at this, I would absolutely commit to that. Now, if other folks can't, then your strategy, I also can do it that way. But it feels like we're at a critical juncture.
Okay. All right. So Kim, let's try to get another meeting of the subcommittee. When do subcommittee meetings resume?
They start pretty soon. I think it's through the end of March. I don't remember the exact dates. I know that there's one probably the 30th, maybe the 29th. I'd have to look again.
Yeah, Advancement and Development's the 25th. I don't know if we're the first one or not, but we have ours the 25th.
You might be the first one. I do know that spring break will happen for some school districts around Easter, so I will wait until the week after. Sorry about that. I will wait until the week after Easter week to start thinking about co-chair meeting scheduling, to make sure that I've skipped any possible spring break options for K-12 folks.
Okay, and if I'm understanding correctly, it would be preferable for DPI to have this kind of explanatory document that we discussed in advance of the first subcommittee meeting.
I believe that's right.
Okay. All right. I'm just making sure.
Yes, sure.
And Tom, you would send that, we would share that with all of the subcommittee members?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Then I think that those subcommittees to me are populated well enough that that reaches a pretty broad audience. All it did was go to the subcommittee members.
Okay.
But that's my perspective, not necessarily the groups.
All right, Kim, anything else we need to discuss before we let folks go?
I don't think so. I think we're good. We'll make sure to get those notes out to each of you. And if you have any thoughts with your partner co-chair as far as your individual meetings, please reach out to me. I'm here to help in any way. You know that the presentation will be the first part of the meeting, and probably a majority of the meeting, because I believe the meetings are an hour and a half for March. We can resume to 2 hours, probably more for April or May.
All right. Thanks, everyone. This has been very productive.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.